Jurors literally gasped when they saw a deleted text from Wendy Adelson to her brother on the morning of the murder of Dan Markel, which of course was July 18th, 2014. And that deleted text message that was recovered by Sergeant Chris Corbett of the Tallahassee Police Department read, "This is so sweet." It is the timing, the lies, the cable cancellations. It's all starting to add up. Is Wendy Adelson potentially the next to be arrested?
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. This is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime and the best trial coverage and analysis. And we are eyeballs deep in the case of Donna Sue Adelson versus the state of Florida. She's facing several charges, including first-degree murder and the murder for hire plot against FSU law professor Dan Markel, who was gunned down, shot twice in the head in his driveway back on July 18th, 2014, and then succumbing to his injuries about 11 or so hours later. I actually had a chance to speak to the rabbi who was with him just this morning, because I'm here in Tallahassee, and he was talking about the utter sadness and just sort of desperate moments of that fateful morning. But while we're here covering Donna Sue Adelson, new information has emerged regarding daughter Wendy, W-E-N-D-I Adelson, and it appears it was all about I when it came to Wendy and the entire Adelson family. They were tired of being in Tallahassee. Dan and Wendy had two young children before the marriage started going south. They had filed for divorce. And this new information that has been leaking out sort of drip by drip in the trial of Donna Sue Adelson could very well lead to a imminent arrest. At least that's what legal experts are telling me, of Wendy Adelson. Of course, prosecutors here are looking for a conviction first of mother Donna Adelson. But let's take a look at some of the things that we are learning about Wendy Adelson in this trial about Donna Adelson. And number one, neither Wendy nor Mama Donna ever wanted to plant roots in Tallahassee. They really hated it here. I don't know why. It's a beautiful place. Wendy never bought a home in Tallahassee and was always angling to return to Miami. But what we learned, and this is something that John Singer, the attorney in New York, very, very shrewd attorney, pointed out, is that Wendy, according to the forensic accountant who testified, her name was Mary Hull. She was on the stand earlier in the week. Wendy had the money back on October 13th, plenty of money to pay for a home that she was looking at. But the reason it turns out that she did not buy the house is because Charlie, about 2 or so weeks later, had met Katie Magbanua. She was the mother of Sigfredo Garcia's children. Sigfredo Garcia is the convicted hitman. Katie Magbanua is the convicted middle woman in this case. But back on Halloween of 2013, months before the murder, Charlie informs Wendy and flags her and says, "Don't buy that house because I met someone named Katie," and he had sent Wendy a picture of him. And Wendy said she did not buy the house because Danny didn't pay her the money she needed. But in fact, Mary Hull, the forensic accountant, said she had more than enough money, but was again apparently waved off by brother Charlie, who believed at that time that he was on to finding someone that maybe could take care of the problem in Tallahassee. And what was the problem? It wasn't a what, it was a who, and that was Wendy's ex-husband, Dan Markel. Now, I was in the courtroom when that happened, and when that was revealed by the forensic accountant, those jurors, there are 14 jurors, 8 men, 6 women with 2 alternates. They were dismayed, to say the least. And it was something later on when Wendy took the stand that they were giving her looks that if they could throw daggers, they would. Now, another issue to think about is something known as the relocation ruling. Wendy had previously claimed that Donna didn't know that a relocation ruling was final, but there's new evidence. Donna's email 5 days after the denial of the relocation says, and this is Donna, no appeal possible. We're disappointed. So Wendy claimed that Donna didn't know about the relocation ruling, but in fact, we learned from an email that Donna was fully aware of it and knew that the relocation was an impossibility, which speaks to potential motive. So getting a little bit more hairy for Wendy. Then we get to literally about a week or so before the murders, maybe 2 weeks before the murders, and there's a calendar entry that reads, cancel cable and get Netflix and an Apple ID. Prosecutors showed that there was a search for cancel cable, switch to Netflix. And what is that sort of attached to? It attaches to premeditation, that, you know, that they knew, not premeditation, but they knew ahead of time to cancel cable because maybe they knew that Dan Markel wouldn't be here in another 2 weeks. Another very curious tidbit of information. And again, jurors looking none too pleased when they were finding out that information. Now, this idea about canceling the cable comes ahead of the murder. Back on July 6th of 2014, again, the murders happened 12 days later, July 18th, 2014. But July 6th, 2014 is an important date because it is the day after Harvey Adelson's birthday party. And the only thing, according to Rob Adelson, the estranged son who testified, typically there were presents given. They just wanted their children there that day because Harvey Adelson was going to get a special gift. A lot of times Adelsons speak in code. And was that special gift getting rid of Dan Markel? Well, on 7/6, one day after Harvey's birthday, Wendy texts ex-husband Dan Markel asking for the kids specifically to have them how many days later? 9 days later, 10 days later, on July 16th. So she texts on July 6th and says, I want the kids on July 16th. And she says, are you in Tallahassee July 14th through the 18th? I just want to know if I can have the kiddos on the 16th. 2 days later, Dan would be murdered. Dan replies, yes. Why the 16th? The car was rented by the killers on the evening of the 15th. The implication at the time, there was a thought that the murder could happen the next day. So maybe Wendy knew the window of time and was trying to get the kids away from Dan. And that's especially important because Luis Rivera testified to the fact several times that they had come up once before in June, but didn't pull off the murder because they didn't want to do it, quote unquote, in front of the kids. And this time, Wendy specifically asking for the kids right around the time frame that the murder would happen. How would Wendy know that if Wendy wasn't somehow in on it? Curious. This stuff is dripping out now. Also new, a new cell tower ping. Wendy was consistent with being at the Continuum. That is the South Beach condominium that Harvey and Donna were retiring in. which has a lot of security because people like Alex Rodriguez, the one-time famous New York Yankee baseball, live in that same building. The cell tower pinged from there. Also on the same day, on July 6th, a calendar event is created for July 7th, and that calendar event is what we started with here, to cancel the cable and get Netflix and an Apple ID. So Wendy is doing this from her parents' condominium in anticipation of what could happen 2 weeks later. And what happens 2 weeks later? Dan Markel is brutally murdered in his driveway. Now, we scoot ahead to the morning of the murder, and there's new digital activity that is discovered. 9:04 a.m., we heard a new voicemail left by Dan. Hi, hey, Wendy, it's Danny. Good morning. It's 9 a.m. on Friday. Dan was murdered on a Friday. It's the last time we hear from him. Just want to let you know, I was hoping to pick the boys up early this afternoon and take them swimming, and then have them ready for you at around 4:30 or 5. If you can pick them up for me or at the house, let me know if that is okay with you. And also, I'd love to chat with you about Ben's situation for school, one of the children, and birthday stuff and all that. I'm going to be at the gym probably between 9:15 and 10:30, but I'm happy to chat or meet with you. Maybe we can go for a walk or something like that. Let me know. Okay, bye. So the morning of, Dan leaves Wendy a detailed voice message of where he's going to be that morning. And we know he was at the gym after dropping the kids off before getting home. And that's when he is shot in the head twice, once between the eyes. A short time after that, at 9:12 in the morning, the morning of the murders, there's a text from Wendy, and she says, "Repairman at my house right now. I'm picking up the boys." The Geek Squad was there to fix a flat screen TV. Jeff Lacasse, when he testified, said, "There's no way a little kid who threw a shoe at a TV broke a flat screen." From what he saw, it was like spider web cracked. It's hard to break a TV to begin with. Jeff Lacasse talks about the suspiciousness of it. But suddenly, Wendy's got this alibi about these Geek Squad guys at her house. So she says, "I'm picking up the boys at 3 p.m., so your swim idea, you want to take the kids swimming, is a no-go today." 9:12, the same minute, Charlie then calls Wendy for 29 seconds. Charlie and Wendy didn't talk that often. Why are they talking the morning of the murders? 1 minute later, Dan to Wendy, "My day ends at 4:30 under our schedule, and you had them until 5 last week." That's what goes on in a divorced household. But 2 minutes later, Wendy now to Dan, "Because you needed to food shop. That's why the time was adjusted." In the same minute, Dan responds to Wendy, "You weren't making them available until 5. So there's a little bit of a back and forth argument. 3 minutes later, Wendy to Dan, "If it was 4:30 last Friday, you should have told me that. Why tell me now?" She's arguing. 9:19, at the same minute, the same time, when she's done with Dan, Wendy calls Charlie for 18 minutes and 17 seconds and claimed the conversation was about fixing the TV. You think any of the jurors are buying that? I'm sitting in the courtroom and I can tell you they are not. Who has ever had a conversation about fixing a flat screen TV that you could probably buy for $239 now at Best Buy? Back then, maybe $600. Who's having a conversation for 18 minutes? Now, if it was going to happen with anybody, it might be Charlie, because the guy can't stop talking. But really, were they maybe talking about something else, considering just a short time later, Dan Markel would literally be on death's door and then succumb to his injuries the following day? Again, she claimed the call was about fixing the TV. But per surveillance video, according to Pat Sanford, the FBI agent, the killers were already tailing Dan at the gym known as Premier Gym. And while Wendy and Charlie are talking about this TV, Dan texts Wendy about the pickup situation the previous week, saying it was because I was being nice. And then Wendy responds by texting back at 9:38 a.m. The final text from Wendy Adelson: "Nice was fun while it lasted." He said I was being nice. She texts back the same morning as the murders: "Nice was fun while it lasted." And she says, "See you at 4:30 p.m. today at my house then." Nice was fun while it lasted. Almost like she knew all of his potential fun, was about to end. Dan was shot shortly before 11 a.m. So it was about an hour and 20 minutes roughly after that last text message, which is just tough to really consider. Really, really tough to consider, and just haunting last words. Prosecutors showed jurors Wendy's quote-unquote fix the TV calendar entry at 8 a.m. When they showed them that, jurors leaned forward in their chairs. This is a very attentive jury. They obviously were suspect. And keep in mind, this is the state of Florida versus Donna Sue Adelson. Are Georgia and Sarah Catherine Dugan just performing a masterpiece here by dropping these bits of very important evidence against Wendy while simultaneously prosecuting the mother, Donna Adelson? And then there's this curious thing. Wendy Adelson takes a long cut, not a shortcut, but a long cut, and drives by Danny's house the morning he's shot after the murder. The street is cordoned off. But what does Wendy never do? She never calls to check on her kids. She never calls to check with Dan. She never calls 911. In fact, she never calls anyone. Even if you're having a bitter divorce and you know that your ex-husband is with your kids and you see police tape up. Now, she claims that maybe a tree fell down. You're not going to call your ex-husband. You're not going to try to reach your children. They're too young at the time to answer the phone. You're not going to try to reach anybody you can. Did she know something that other people didn't know? And there was a police officer that testified to the fact that Wendy was right in that area, right up on the tape. And so she had to know that something was wrong, and maybe she knew what that something was. Another really interesting thing, she was preoccupied with knowing exactly not only when Dan Markel was leaving town, which he was planning to do, and they wanted to get the murder done before he left. That's according to prosecutors. But she had a boyfriend at the time, Jeff Lacasse, who's a very strong witness and testified again in Donna's case. One of the things that we learned this time around is the first time the hitmen went up to try to take out Dan Markel the previous month, they didn't do it because the kids were there, but they rented a Nissan Sentra. And what did Jeff Lacasse drive at the time? A Nissan Sentra. Could it be that the Adelsons were cruel enough and that Wendy was cruel enough? And Wendy was very specific and particular. And Jeff Lacasse talked about how weird it was that she wanted to make sure that Jeff Lacasse didn't leave town till after the 18th, which is when Dan Markel was murdered. Did Wendy know that something was going to happen on the 18th? Did she want to maybe pin it on her boyfriend who she was breaking up with, Jeff Lacasse, who may have had motive because he was a jealous boyfriend? Could Wendy Adelson be that sinister, along with her mother and the rest of her family, except for Rob Adelson, the one good egg in that family? Could she have been so sinister as to want to put it on Jeff Lacasse, who just by chance left the night before and had an alibi? And did he accidentally just screw over Wendy Adelson and her plans? I don't know. That could be it. And then this time around, something interesting happened. Luis Rivera, he sort of mentioned Wendy once, I had found out during the Katie McBanowood trial. But here, Luis Rivera is the only one that took a plea deal. He's the Latin Kings gang member, 19-year deal to cooperate. He said that they didn't kill, this was his testimony this time, they didn't kill Dan Markel the first time they caravanned up to Tallahassee because they didn't want to kill him in front of the kids. Very thoughtful. While he didn't know the Adelsons, he said he knew that he was helping a lady named Wendy, that I was helping a lady named Wendy get her kids back. And he specifically used the name Wendy. The Craig Isom contradiction. Wendy testified she only learned about Dan's shooting once inside a police car, but Detective Craig Isom tells her directly on video, and you see a look of shock. So did he really tell her in the car? Or does he tell her in the interview room? I guess Craig Isom is the only one that would know the answer to that. But did Wendy already know and was feigning a look of shock? Another thing to consider. Now, this does not relate to Wendy specifically, but curiously, on the night of the murder, after Wendy from the police interview calls her mother, and by the way, Jackie Fulford says, you can hear how panicked Donna is. Donna is not very panicked. I would say not panicked at all. It was almost like when Wendy called her, she was letting her know. What I think Wendy was panicked about was that Dan actually hadn't died that day. He clung on for about 11 hours. He didn't die till July 19th. And I think she was calling, and this is my opinion, and everyone here is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But it is my opinion, my humble opinion, that in that moment at the police department, she was panicked because the job wasn't completed. Dan was shot, but he didn't die, and Wendy didn't really know the state of condition that he was in. And so Wendy calls Donna, and Donna is not panicked. It's almost to let her know that the job was done, but maybe it wasn't completed. But nevertheless, the Adelsons say, okay, we're going to drive up as concerned in-laws from South Florida. But they stop at Charlie's, and there's 1 hour and 6 minutes that we find out that are unaccounted for. What's going on there? Is there an exchange of money going on for a murder for hire plot? What happened in those 1 hour and 6 minutes? Cell tower data shows that gap between, quote unquote, being outside of Charlie's house and a hotel check-in. And when all that came up, jurors were leaning forward, ears perked, and just wondering what is going on. So I wouldn't say it's a flood of new evidence, but I would say it's a steady drip of new evidence against Wendy Adelson, from cable cancellations to custody schedule manipulation, from a suspicious text that was deleted that said "so sweet" to her brother the morning of the murders, to an 18-minute call the morning of the murders while hitmen were following Dan around Tallahassee, and it's all caught on video. The evidence, bit by bit, none of it might be a smoking gun, but it is a slow-burning fire that is starting to take the oxygen away from Wendy Adelson. And I can tell you, all the lawyers that I've talked to, the ones that were very heavily against the idea of Wendy Adelson potentially ever being charged with this crime, have all now completely changed their tune and believe that an arrest is imminent. So if I'm Wendy Adelson, I am awfully concerned. And I'll say this, and other people have said it as well, this time around, she was much more low-key on the witness stand. She was not antagonistic, almost acting like someone who's been caught in a bunch of lies. Now, she has immunity, but it's not blanket immunity. And trust me, Georgia Kappelman, Sarah Catherine Dugan, and the state attorney, Jack Campbell, they're very smart. They're seeing these contradictions in real time, and we're all wondering what's going to happen. So I've got a question for you, STS Nation. Is this all cumulatively, all put together as a little tiny mountain of evidence? Is it enough now to indict Wendy Adelson, or is it still just sort of bits and pieces of circumstantial evidence? Do me a favor, drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll read them live on the show. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thank you for being here. This episode all about the potential for Wendy Adelson to be the next one arrested. Will it happen? Let me know. Love you, America. Love you, Tallahassee. And justice for Dan Markel. Always. It's been 11 years too long. See you on the flip side.